My sister was determined to have a test baby and give birth to a son with her vegetative husband, and I tried to stop her. However, she held a grudge against me for this, believing that I had cut off the Yu family's bloodline. She moved into my house with her daughter, spent my money, and yet constantly blamed me, saying, "It's you who made me not have a son. You should support me from now on." Later, my sister used all the money for my cancer treatment to reward male streamers, leaving me without money for treatment, and I died on the hospital bed. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day my brother-in-law was diagnosed as a vegetative. My sister, wiping her tears, said to me, "I want to have a test baby and give him a son." I sneered and said, "Well, I wish you both a son and a daughter." I never expected that I would be reborn. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw the white walls. The strong smell of disinfectant hit my nose, and in my ears was my sister Miracle's sharp retort, "I must have a test baby. I must leave a descendant for the Yu family." Miracle sobbed softly, and still didn't forget to tuck in the corner of the quilt for my unconscious brother-in-law on the bed, saying, "Although my husband is a vegetative, I can still have a second child for him through surgery." People around her tried to persuade her one after another, "Don't you already have a daughter? Your daughter is so young. And your mother-in-law is in poor health and can't help you. If you have a second child, how can you manage everything in the future? It's better to give up." Unexpectedly, Miracle stood up abruptly. She was full of vigor, like a rooster ready to fight at any time. "What's the use of a daughter? A daughter will eventually get married. A woman's life is not complete until she gives birth to a son." Looking at the saliva flying from Miracle's mouth in the sunlight, I suddenly woke up. So I had been reborn back to the day my brother-in-law was diagnosed as a vegetative. In my previous life, I felt sorry for my sister and was worried that her life would be tough after having a second child. So after discussing with my mother, we persuaded her to give up, and I made the decision to cancel the test tube surgery examination for her. Unexpectedly, right after the examination was cancelled, my brother-in-law passed away. Miracle held a grudge against me because of this, believing that I had cut off the Yu family's bloodline. She blamed me for all the hardships she had suffered. Less than half a month after her husband died, she moved into my house with her daughter and asked me to hire an Annie to take care of them. I felt guilty and, persuaded by my mother, I agreed. But who knew that Miracle spent my money extravagantly and still constantly blamed me. "It's you who made me not have a son. You should support me from now on." Later, she made a mess in my house, and I was so angry with her that I got breast cancer. When it was time to pay the medical bills, I found that all my savings had been used by her to reward male streamers. When I questioned her, she said righteously, "I rewarded them just to fulfill my dream of having a son. If you hadn't stopped me from having a son, my son would be as old as them now. Is there anything wrong with me using your money to raise a son?" In the end, I died on the hospital bed because I had no money for treatment. Reborn in this life, I decided to give up the idea of helping her and see how she would act. People around, hearing Miracle's words, couldn't help shaking their heads, saying she was too stupid. But Miracle, like in the previous life, argued strongly for having a test baby. Moreover, my daughter Grace is 8 years old now. When I have the second child, she can help me take care of her brother. How can I not manage? These words immediately aroused the dissatisfaction of a couple. They looked at Grace, who was sitting in the corner, silent and shrinking, and sighed, "How much can your little girl help? She still has to go to school and get married in the future. Have you ever thought about her?" Miracle glanced at Grace, snorted with a hint of mockery on her face. "It's only natural for an older sister to take care of her younger brother. Not to mention going to school and getting married, even if she has children and is old. If her brother is in trouble, she still has to help. At that time, I'll make her drop out of school early and come out to earn money to save up a betrothal gift and buy a house for her brother. Then I'll be relaxed." Hearing this, the little niece's eyes turned red. She bit her lower lip, her body trembling slightly. But she still didn't dare to say a word for herself. I sighed silently in my heart. The little girl had been smart. Filial, hadn't so filled my obsession. kind-hearted and considerate since she was a child. Unfortunately, hadn't felt nice. She had such a mother. People around pointed at her. Seeing that no one was on her side, she came towards me with red eyes. Man. You know the relationship between me and your brother-in-law. I want to have a test tube baby and give him a son. You'll support me, right? Looking at that familiar face, I sneered and said, of course. I wish you both a son and a daughter. Miracle happily went for the test tube examination. Soon she told me the news that the fertilized egg had successfully implanted. In order to keep this pregnancy, Miracle had been taking injections and medicine for the first 3 months of pregnancy. When I went to the hospital to visit my brother-in-law, my sister pointed to the purple-blue skin on the back of her hand, which was full of needle holes, and smiled at me, saying, look. Although my hand has been pricked into calluses, my heart is sweet. I slightly curled my lips, but my eyes fell on Grace, who had just come back with a thermos of hot water. She was a small figure, yet she was holding a big thermos. She walked carefully, with each step being extremely difficult, for fear that the thermos in her arms would fall. It had only been 3 months since I last saw her, but she looked even thinner than before. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was class time now, so I frowned and asked her, Grace, why are you here? Don't you need to go to school? The little niece bit her lip. She seemed to want to say something but stopped. After her eyes met Miracle's, she quickly lowered her head, slowly put the thermos on the table, and answered in a low voice, no, I don't need to go to school today. As soon as she finished speaking, the old man in the next bed sighed deeply. It's not that she doesn't need to go to school. Her mother didn't pay her tuition at all. Such a young girl. She has to take care of her father's daily needs in the hospital every day, and also take care of her pregnant mother. She's really pitiful. Whether in the previous life or this life, I really liked this little niece from the bottom of my heart. Hearing that Miracle didn't pay her tuition, I couldn't help asking. After your brother-in-law had a car accident, didn't the insurance company pay a sum of money? Why not use it to pay Grace's tuition? She should go to school at this age. But Miracle got very excited and interrupted me loudly. Study? What's the point of studying? Where does the family have money for her to study? Now your brother-in-law has become a vegetative, and the family has no income. I've just gotten pregnant, and it's not easy to find a job. The daily expenses are so high. We need to save as much as we can. The compensation money from your brother-in-law can't be touched now. It's for buying milk powder and nutritional products for my son after he's born. I frowned and looked at the little niece who was standing by the bed, ready to wipe my brother-in-law's body. Her hands were so small. The large towel became heavy when wet, and she had to wring it out into tries, using all her strength. After wringing it out, she used the warm towel to carefully wipe my brother-in-law's face bit by bit. Her movements were so skillful that it made people feel heartbroken. It seemed that she had done such things thousands of times. I asked the little niece in a low voice, Grace, do you want to study? Grace looked at me, and her obsidian-like eyes suddenly shone with light. She didn't answer, but just nodded vigorously. Unexpectedly, Miracle beside her snorted coldly, and put the soup bowl in her hand heavily on the table. How can you be so thoughtless and not consider the family at all? The old man in the next bed couldn't stand it anymore. Do you know that it's illegal not to send a child to school during the compulsory education stage? Miracle became even more angry, and started cursing at the old man. Mind your own business about our family's affairs. After that, she pushed Grace hard with her hand. If anyone asks you in the future, you say you don't want to study yourself. Got it? The family is already in such a mess. Don't cause me any more trouble. Grace could only blink back her tears, lower her head, and answer silently, okay. After venting her anger on her daughter, Miracle turned around and tugged at my wrist, saying with a hint of dissatisfaction in her voice, a girl is just a money-losing burden. What's the use of studying? It's better to save the money and use it to raise her brother in the future. As she spoke, she pushed me with her elbow. Look, I have no income now, and life is tight. There will be a lot of expenses for having a baby in the future. Why don't you lend your sister some money so that Grace and I can live a better life? I scoffed and said with a smile. You know, I just bought a house not long ago and have to pay the mortgage every month. Where do I get the money? Moreover, you insisted on having a second child. No one forced you. This is the path you chose. Figure it out yourself. Test tube babies, genders can't be chosen. So Miracle prayed to the gods every day, hoping that God would let her have a boy. 10 months later, she got what she wanted. However, Miracle suddenly had a massive hemorrhage during childbirth. In order to save her life, the doctor had no choice but to remove her uterus. Miracle didn't seem to care much about this. Anyway, I've already had a son. From now on, I'll rely on him completely. Losing the uterus is just fine. Because she wanted to save money, Miracle didn't dare to hire a confinement nanny, and did everything by herself during the confinement period. Neighbors, seeing that she gave birth alone, asked her how she managed it. She replied proudly, "Naturally. It's because I have a good daughter. Although our Grace has just turned 9. She always gets up at night to feed her brother. During the day, she cooks meals and then goes to the hospital to take care of her father. She only sleeps 2 or 3 hours a day." The neighbors couldn't stand it and always advised Miracle not to treat the child so harshly. But Miracle retorted, "What do you know? I'm her biological mother. I gave birth to her and raised her. All these things are what she should do now." The neighbor sighed and said, "Even so, you should at least let Grace have enough to eat, right? You feed her boiled green vegetables every day and make her do so much work. She's still growing. How can she bear it?" Miracle was making milk for her son Leo in the room and didn't forget to add a few spoons of imported nutritional powder to the bottle. "Where do we have the money to buy meat for her? Girls will eventually get married. It's good enough that she has green vegetables to eat. Does she still want to eat meat? That's just a waste." Miracle forced her niece to stay at home to work, didn't let her go to school, and didn't give her enough to eat, due to long-term hard work. One day she suddenly fainted. I rushed to the hospital with nutritional products in a hurry. But what I saw was Miracle standing in front of the hospital bed, pulling out the IV drip on Grace's hand barehanded, and lifting her up from the bed. "What are you pretending for? You're such a useless thing. You fainted after doing just a little work. Who are you acting for?" Grace's face was extremely pale. After the needle was pulled out, her hand was constantly bleeding. Yet she still comforted Miracle instead. "Mom, what? I know it's expensive to be hospitalized. I'll go and tell the doctor right now that I won't stay. I'll save money for the family." Hearing Grace's words, the expression on Miracle's face, which had been covered with dark clouds, finally eased a little. "Humph. You're sensible. The money in the family will be for your younger brother in the future. You have to save some for him. However much you spend now, you have to earn back 10 or 100 times as much for him later. Got it?" Grace bit her lips tightly. I could see her resistance. But in order not to make Miracle angry, she still nodded slightly. I really couldn't stand it anymore. I walked into the ward and waved to my niece. "Grace, come here. Let Auntie have a look. How did you get sick?" Seeing me come, Grace's eyes lit up. She trotted towards me and buried her head deeply in my arms. In an instant, I felt her body as hot as a stove. "Grace, how did you get such a high fever? Where's the doctor? Go and call the doctor quickly." Miracle walked over, casually put her hand on Grace's forehead, and chuckled. "It's not a big deal. There's no need to be hospitalized, and there's no need to see a doctor. It's so expensive. You don't have kids, so you don't understand. For a kid with a fever, just cover them with a quilt, and it'll be okay. There's a younger one at home waiting for Grace to go back and take care of. She doesn't have time to stay here." Grace was lying in my arms, her body trembling slightly. I knew she was crying, so I patted her shoulder quietly to soothe her. "Since the doctor has prescribed the medicine, it should be finished. The cost of this medicine is included in the bill. If you don't finish it, the hospital won't refund the money. If you pull out Grace's IV drip now, isn't that a waste of money?" After hearing this, Miracle was silent for a while, then nodded. "All right. Then finish this bottle." I called the nurse to insert the needle for Grace again. As soon as I lifted Grace's hospital gown, I found her arms were covered with bruises. The marks were thin and long, crisscrossing, and obviously left by bamboo strips. How did Grace get hurt like this? Did you hit her? I frowned and then lifted Grace's trouser leg. I found that her legs were also covered with old and new scars. These definitely weren't left by one or two beatings. While wiping the face of her husband on the hospital bed, Miracle smiled and said, "Grace always says she's hungry and often gets up in the middle of the night to steal food. What's wrong with me? As a mother? Teaching her a lesson?" I was about to retort. But Miracle sneered. "You're not willing to lend me some money. You clearly know my family has no money. What's wrong with asking her to save on food? I manage my own children." "You shut up." I couldn't help rolling my eyes. "It's not me who made your family have no money. It's you who gave up a good life and burdened yourself. So many people tried to persuade you at that time. But you were determined to go your own way." After hearing this, Miracle snorted heavily but didn't dare to refute. I didn't leave the hospital until Grace finished the drip. Unexpectedly, as soon as I stepped out of the hospital gate, Grace chased after me. She reached out and grabbed the corner of my clothes, looking up at me with full of hope. "Auntie, can you help me? I want to study. I don't want to live like this anymore." I didn't want to take care of her at first. After all, having learned the lesson from my past life, in this life, I constantly remind myself to give up the idea of helping others and respect others' fates. But when I saw Grace's young face, I just couldn't bear to completely ignore her. Recalling my past life, when I was lying on the bed, dying and suffering from the pain of cancer, only Grace ran around for me and took care of me wholeheartedly. To make me happy, she told me fairy tales by my bedside every day. Although I could recite those stories backwards, her actions made me feel warm. Whenever I had an argument with Miracle, Grace would always stand by my side. Because of this, Miracle hit her quite often. I let out a long sigh, squatted down, and gently patted Grace's shoulder with my hand. "And I can save you for a while, but I can't save you for a lifetime. If you want to get rid of this kind of life, you have to learn to save yourself." Grace was silent for a while, then nodded firmly. She talked with me for quite a while. Before leaving, I told her that if she encountered domestic violence or mistreatment, she could seek help from online media or the local women's federation. Besides, I also gave her a contact number. The number I gave Grace was that of my college senior. That senior's name is Brian. As far as I know, he's now working as a reporter in a famous newspaper. I thought that as a media worker, Brian must have a way to help Grace. Sure enough, 2 days later, Brian took the initiative to contact me and invited me to meet at a coffee shop. As soon as I sat down, he asked me about Grace's current situation. I told Brian everything Miracle had done in detail. In just one day, Brian collected enough evidence. He reported the matter that Miracle insisted on giving birth to a second child with her vegetative husband, and then forced her own daughter to stay at home to take care of her younger brother through online media. This matter caused a huge stir on the internet, and Miracle was cyberbullied because of it. The couple's love is as firm as a rock, but it's the little girl who suffers. The father paralyzed in bed, the mother getting old, and the baby brother waiting to be fed. Just thinking about it makes one feel suffocated for the little girl. Since she wanted to have a baby herself, why can't she raise it? Why does she have to put the burden on the little girl, and even deprive her of the right to compulsory education? What else is she if not a devil? The online comments were one-sided, and no one stood by Miracle's side. The matter spread wider and wider, and the situation got bigger and bigger. Eventually, it directly caught the attention of the local women's federation. That night, the staff of the Women's Federation came to her home. Under the strong demand of the Women's Federation, Miracle had no choice but to pay Grace's tuition fees. I thought that after this incident, Miracle would treat Grace better. But the facts proved that one shouldn't expect a person without a moral bottom line to improve their quality. Seeing that everyone was on Grace's side, Miracle played a double-faced game. During the day, she let Grace go to school as normal. But at night, she always found ways to torture her. She went outside to wholesale handicrafts and brought them home. At night, She didn't allow Grace to sleep and made her do handicrafts all night to earn money to subsidize the family. She also made her take care of all the housework. The most hateful thing was that now she didn't even give her boiled vegetables with water. She only gave her a small bowl of white porridge every day. If she saw Grace stealing food, she would beat her severely. When others criticized her, she would retort harshly. This good-for-nothing girl spent so much money on studying. Shouldn't she earn it back for me? It's good enough that she has porridge to drink. Anyway, having fulfilled my obsession, she won't starve to death. One day after work, when I saw Auntie Neighbor coming out of a small clinic, with Grace following behind, her head wrapped in a bandage, my heart skipped a beat. I quickly grabbed her and asked what had happened. Before Grace could speak, big tears fell from her eyes. Auntie Neighbor looked at Grace, shaking her head, her eyes full of pity. This child is so filial and sensible. Why was she born into this family? Other people's hearts are made of flesh, but I think Miracle's heart is made of iron. After asking, I found out that last night, when Grace got up in the middle of the night to make milk for Leo, she accidentally broke Leo's milk bottle because she was too tired. I heard that the milk bottle was specially brought back from abroad by Miracle and cost several hundred yuan. Miracle flew into a rage because of this and didn't give Grace any food all day today. When Grace passed by the trash can at the entrance of the alley after school, she found half a piece of discarded cake in it. She was so hungry that she secretly picked it up and hid in the alley to eat. Unexpectedly, Miracle saw this scene. Miracle thought she was embarrassing, called her a jinx and a little beggar, and beat her until her head was bleeding. If Auntie Neighbor hadn't arrived in time, Grace might have been beaten to death by her. I looked at Grace standing aside, her eyes red-rimmed, and I felt an indescribable feeling in my heart. After seeing Auntie Neighbor off, I squatted beside Grace and asked her softly, "Grace, do you want to leave your mom?" Grace nodded heavily, her eyes extremely firm. "Auntie, Yibararalel Sai, I want to follow you. Can you be my mom?" After saying this, Grace stared at me without blinking, a hint of eagerness in her eyes. She was afraid that I would refuse. I sighed and touched Grace's head. "Go home and pack your things. Auntie will come to pick you up tonight. Although the procedures may be very troublesome, Auntie will do her best." Grace suddenly looked up. She looked at me with joy in her eyes. Those clear eyes seemed to be engraved with countless gorgeous sceneries because of my words. "Auntie. Auntie, Anne? I'll wait for you. I'll go pack my things right now." But unexpectedly, before I could go to pick up Grace, I received the news that she was hospitalized with a broken leg caused by Miracle. When I rushed to the hospital in a hurry, there were already a lot of people gathered in front of Grace's ward. What on earth happened? How could it be like this? When the staff from the Women's Federation saw me come in, they told me the whole story, each chiming in. It turned out that Miracle had someone bring back a toy truck from abroad for Leo. Grace had never seen it before and thought it was novel, so she picked it up and played with it casually. Unexpectedly, Leo had a hot temper. When he saw that his toy was taken by his sister, he directly stabbed Grace's hand with scissors. As soon as Grace saw blood on her hand, she immediately let go. To everyone's surprise, the toy fell to the ground and broke. Miracle then beat Grace severely for this and broke one of Grace's legs with a rolling pin. "You broke your brother's toy, so I'll break one of your legs. Consider this a lesson for you. Let's see if you dare to touch your brother's things in the future." Fortunately, having fulfilled Lee, after going through previous incidents, Grace had become smart. She snatched Miracle's phone, dragged her broken leg, hid in the room, and quickly called the Women's Federation. That night, I expressed my wish to adopt Grace to the staff of the Women's Federation. To protect Grace, the staff let her stay with me for the time being. When Miracle found out, she rushed to the downstairs of my house and started cursing, "Samantha, what's the use of you protecting her? I'm her biological mother. Grace will always be my daughter and will always serve the Yu family. Don't think you can take her away from me." That night, I called Brian in North State. With his help, I got in touch with a well-known local lawyer. On the day of the court session, in order to obtain Grace's custody, Miracle flatly denied what she had done. Both sides stuck to their guns and refused to give in. The lawsuit was in full swing. Just then, without a lull sigh, Grace suddenly stood up. She took out an old mobile phone from her pocket and opened a video on it. The video clearly showed the scene of Miracle beating Grace that night. Grace said she picked up this phone from a trash can on the street and had been hiding it. This video was recorded accidentally that day. She also took off her coat in public, revealing her scarred hands and thighs. "Your Honor, please don't award me to Miracle. Although she is my mother and gave birth to me, she has never loved me. I want to go with my aunt." Because of this unexpected evidence, Miracle lost the lawsuit. With the judgment announced, I obtained the custody of Grace. At the lawyer's suggestion, Brian asked Miracle to sign an agreement to sever the relationship with Grace and recorded the whole process of my legal adoption of Grace as evidence. Outside the court, Miracle hugged Leo tightly and sneered at me and Grace. "I have Leo now. What do I need a daughter for? If you want that good-for-nothing girl, you can have her. I don't care." Just as I was about to step forward and retort, Brian was one step ahead of me. He shook the video recorder in his hand and sneered. "I hope you remember what you said today. Don't come begging later, saying you want to recognize this child back." Miracle looked at the video recorder that had been turned on long ago. Her face darkened. She snorted, and then turned around and left. Brian sent Grace and me back to our place. That he kept stammering and seemed to have something to say but held back. Grace had lived with Miracle for a long time and had learned to read people's expressions early. She took a look at Brian and then hurried back to her room. Seeing that there were only the two of us left in the living room, Brian hesitated for a while and finally summoned up the courage to confess his love to me. "Samantha, you rejected me once when we were in college. You can't reject me again now, right? For all these years, I've actually been waiting for you." Looking at the slightly flustered Brian, I felt a bit uncomfortable. Brian did confess his love to me when we were in college. In fact, I was also attracted to him at that time. But in my sophomore year, I was diagnosed with a unicorn-weight uterus and renal acidopia, and it was almost impossible for me to get pregnant in the future. I didn't want to drag Brian down, and I wasn't sure if he could accept me like this. So I declined him gently. Over the years, I occasionally heard news about Brian from other classmates and knew that he had never had a girlfriend. My friends said he was waiting for me. So I chose to stay away and never took the initiative to contact him. If it weren't for Grace's matter, I'm afraid I would never have gone to him. Now, seeing his persistent look, I found it hard to say the words of rejection. "I told you a long time ago that I can't have children." Before I could finish, Brian interrupted me. "It doesn't matter. None of this matters. You've adopted Grace now. And I like her too. If you're willing, we can raise her together." Brian's attitude was very firm, and I could only tell him that I needed time to think about it. After all, now that I had Grace, I was no longer alone. I needed to plan for Grace's future. After seeing Brian off and turning back to my room, Grace came to knock on the door. The little girl was wearing the new nightgown I bought for her, and her big, shiny black eyes stared straight at me. "Aunt, I can tell that Uncle Brian likes you. You like him too. Why don't you want to accept him?" I smiled and stroked Grace's head, telling her the fact that I couldn't have a baby. Grace squatted beside me, tilted her head, and told me, "Aunt, I'll tell you a secret. I deliberately broke my brother's car that day and made Mom break my leg on purpose." I was shocked and suddenly looked at Grace. "Why did you do that?" Grace smiled and shrugged. "I checked. If we couldn't get evidence of Mom's violence, it would be very difficult for the court to award me to you. Only by getting the video of Mom's violence could we win. You once said that you could help me for a while, but not for a lifetime. Aunt, I was just saving myself. Not to mention breaking a leg. Even if I had to pay a greater price. I wanted to escape. Because I want a better life." I stared at Grace in a daze. I never expected that the innocent and naive little girl before now had such a plan. But I was happy for her. The adult world is never spotless. If she understood these truths earlier, the road ahead would be easier for her. I reached out and hugged Grace in my arms, patting her back tenderly. Grace hugged me and said sweetly, "So I think, Aunt, you can also have a better life." In my previous life, because of Miracle's matter and my own physical condition, I never got married and ended up alone. I always felt that I didn't deserve love or marriage. Now, Grace's words made me suddenly see the light. Since Brian didn't mind, what was I still worrying about? My little niece, in order to gain freedom and have a better life, was struggling so hard to save herself at such a young age. As an adult, what was there for me to worry about? I think life is just a journey through this world, experiencing the ups and downs. No one's life can be completely smooth. When going through hardships, never give up. Try to gather strength. Even if it's just a ray of light shining through a crack, hold on to it tightly and then generate the courage to live despite difficulties. No matter how bad the world is. Please. Again and again. Unceasingly. Thousands of times. Without hesitation. Save yourself from the troubles of this world. Grace became visibly more cheerful under my care, while Miracle's life became visibly chaotic after losing Grace as her right-hand helper. She had to take care of her vegetative husband and the baby who needed constant feeding. In just half a year, she was a mess. She had white hair at a young age. Her originally rosy face gradually turned sallow, and wrinkles crept up around her eyes. In contrast to how she treated Grace, Miracle doted on Leo extremely. Whenever Leo wanted some high-end toys, Miracle would buy them for him without hesitation. I heard that just the nutritional powder for Leo cost several $1,000 a month. When others tried to persuade her, she would argue, "I only have this one son to rely on now, so of course I have to treat him well. These are just small change now. When Leo grows up, he will surely earn a lot of money and bring it back to me." Because she couldn't go out to work and spent money on Leo without restraint. In just 2 years, Miracle had spent all of her husband's compensation money. Under the pressure of life, Miracle had to find a part-time job near the hospital, and her life became even harder. Once, I took Grace to the hospital for a physical examination, and happened to see the emaciated Miracle in the hospital corridor. She was carrying a lunchbox in one hand, a thermos in the other, and there were 2 bags of changed clothes hanging on her wrist. She walked slowly, like a penguin. Leo was following leisurely behind her, happily playing games on a new mobile phone, without any intention of helping Miracle carry things. My boyfriend Brian came towards me. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help laughing. When she had Grace, she didn't know how to cherish. I wonder if she regrets it now. Brian's voice wasn't loud, but Miracle still heard it. She rolled her eyes at us and nudged Leo, who was standing beside her, with her elbow. "Baby, can you help Mom carry the lunchbox? Mom is a bit tired. You're the most obedient and considerate, right?" Miracle winked hard at Leo, thinking that her son would cooperate with her act, but her precious son turned his face away infuriately after hearing this. "Don't you see I'm busy? You usually do it yourself. What's wrong with doing it for a while longer now? Besides, these housework tasks are supposed to be done by you women. I'm a boy and don't need to do this." Leo's words made Miracle's slightly raised eyebrows droop instantly. The patients in the hospital corridor seemed to be used to it, and teased Leo. "Wow. Our Leo is so chauvinistic at such a young age. Chauvinistic boys will have a hard time finding a girlfriend these days." These words seemed to hit Miracle's sore spot. She jumped up, and her voice became a bit shriller. "So what if he's chauvinistic? This shows that our Leo is a real man. His hands are for doing big things in the future. So of course he can't be bothered with housework." Brian was trying hard to hold back his laughter, almost unable to contain it. Seeing this, Miracle got even angrier. She glanced at Grace, who was wearing a tight-fitting dance costume, and snorted, "I thought you were living a good life at Samantha's place. But she actually bought you such slutty clothes. It's really a disgrace to the Yu family. I say raising a daughter isn't as reliable as raising a son. When she grows up, you won't even know where she'll be lured away to." Grace couldn't stand seeing me being bullied. When she heard Miracle's words, she quickly explained, "That's not true. This is a dance costume. Auntie and Uncle Brian sent me to dance class. I just finished class and didn't have time to change yet." Brian, Aleve too, who was standing beside chimed in. Exactly. Our Grace is amazing. Not only does she always get the first place in school exams, but she also won the first prize in the city-wide dance competition last week when she went to the city to participate. The uncles and aunts nearby praised continuously. I didn't expect this little girl to be so outstanding. Who says raising a son is definitely better than raising a daughter? Daughters are so considerate. They're much better than some sons. Miracle retracted her gaze, looking very disdainful. So what if she just goes dancing? What's there to be proud of? Can dancing feed you? Unlike our Leo. Although he's only 3 years old, he's already the little kingpin in the kindergarten. All the kids in the school listen to him. No one dares to bully him. Our Leo is going to be a high-ranking official in the future. As Leo grew older, he wanted more and more things. And they were getting more and more expensive. Under the pressure of life, Miracle took on 3 jobs a day. She was as busy as a spinning top and became increasingly haggard. However, even so, Miracle's living conditions didn't improve much. The 1-week hospitalization fee for her vegetative husband took away most of Miracle's salary. Probably because my rebirth changed the timeline. Different from my previous life. My brother-in-law didn't pass away until Leo started primary school. Miracle became free. And due to economic pressure, finally, having fulfilled Lionly, persuaded by those around her, she began to go on blind dates frequently. But now she was getting old, and she had a son. She also lost her fertility when giving birth to Leo, so she had no advantage in the blind date scene. After several rounds of blind dates, she only met strange people. Some intended to live off their wives. Some had a criminal record. And others were alcoholics or gamblers who had been divorced 2 or 3 times. Later, the matchmaker finally found a man who was willing to accept her. But that man was infertile and, at the first meeting, asked Leo to change his surname and be his son. However, Miracle thought that if Leo changed his surname, it would cut off the Yu family's bloodline. So she refused firmly. The matchmaker was angry. Seeing Brian and me passing by while buying groceries, she pulled me into the house and asked me to persuade Miracle. Your sister is really ignorant. Doesn't she know her own situation? It's one thing that she can't have children. Most importantly, Leo has a bad temper. And not many people are willing to accept him. What's the big deal about just changing Leo's surname? I've inquired about everything. Although that man has some problems with fertility, he's very capable, good at doing business, and reliable. If your sister follows him, she'll surely live a good life. I looked at Miracle in the room with a gloomy face and shook my head. I won't persuade her. I won't get involved in her affairs. The neighbor sitting beside, who loved to watch the excitement, said in a sarcastic tone, Oh, she has poor conditions. Has a son. And her son has a bad temper. Who would dare to want her? In today's society, if you get married with a son, people are afraid that you're going to fight for the family property. At that time, all of us advised you not to do IVF and not to have this second child, but you just wouldn't listen. Now you're in this mess. You deserve it. Miracle was so angry that she was trembling. She put her hands on her hips and started cursing. What does it have to do with you whether I have a child or not? I won't get married. I won't get married. Now that I have a son, I can live a good life relying on him in the future. You don't know. Our Leo is amazing. He always gets 80 points in exams. He'll surely be successful in the future. The neighbor got anxious and sneered. So what? It'll be a long time before your son grows up. Won't you be as busy as a donkey in these years? Originally, having fulfilled wives up, with Grace around, you could have been more relaxed. But you chose to do evil yourself. You're in this situation now. It's truly a case of getting what you deserve. Miracle raised her eyebrows. And her face quickly turned gloomy. With obvious mockery on her face. What can that good-for-nothing Grace do? How can a girl compare with a boy? I was about to refute when Brian beside me grabbed my wrist. I saw him slowly take out his phone from his pocket, open the photo album, and slide through the photos leisurely, speaking in a somewhat lazy voice. Yeah, our Grace is indeed nothing special. She just got full marks in every subject when she was in primary school. She won the first prize in the citywide dance competition as soon as she entered school. And she was sent to the provincial competition last May, and also won a place. I held back my laughter and gave Brian a thumbs up. I took the phone from his hand, enlarged the photos of Grace's full cancer sheets on it, and showed them to the neighbor beside me. Look at our Grace. She's been loving to be tidy since she was a child. Even the exam papers are so clean. And her handwriting is so good. When we sent Grace to school today, the principal even praised us for raising a good daughter. Hearing our words, Miracle's eyes bent. But all the smiles disappeared. With a gloomy face, she quickly interrupted me. So what? At least I have a son in my hands. But you have a girl. And she's not even your biological daughter. You can't have children yourself. You'll have problems with carrying on the family line in the future. What are you showing off for? Miracle looked at Brian. Extremely proud. Does your parents know that Samantha can't have children? Who can accept a woman who can't have children? Hearing this, Brian's face darkened, and he quickly protected me behind him. Why can't they accept it? Our family doesn't have an imperial throne to inherit, and our parents aren't as ignorant as you. Besides, we have Grace. And that's enough. After saying this, Brian put his arm around my waist and left. Before leaving, he didn't forget to add, Brienne and I are getting married next month. Everyone come to the wedding banquet. I held back my laughter. And from the corner of my eye, I saw Miracle getting angry and chasing people away. Throwing things. It was really satisfying. Not long after the blind date incident, something happened to Miracle's precious son. Due to Miracle's spoiling, Leo had a high material desire. Whenever he saw something he liked, he wanted to get it, no matter how expensive it was. One day, Leo's desk mate bought a new children's watch. He liked it very much and went home to pester Miracle to buy it for him. But when Miracle checked online, she found that the watch was an imported product and cost several thousand yuan. This was almost her entire month's salary. So Miracle refused. How could Leo stand such a grievance? He thought that Miracle not buying things for him meant she didn't love him. So he had a big fight with Miracle. The next day at school, while his classmate was going to the toilet, he secretly put the children's watch into his school bag. That desk mate had been bullied by Leo for a long time. When he found that Leo had stolen his thing, he reported it directly to the teacher and even threatened to call the police and send Leo to a reformatory. Leo flew into a rage and picked up a chair nearby and smashed it at his desk mate, seriously injuring him. Both parents were called to the school. The other side asked Miracle to pay compensation and apologize. Otherwise, they would send Leo to a reformatory. It was said that the desk mate's father was a high-ranking official in the city, and Miracle didn't dare to offend him. To solve this problem, Miracle could only go home and reason with her son. Unexpectedly, after she just criticized him a few words lightly, Leo pushed her to the ground viciously. Why is our family so poor? Why don't I even have a watch? Why did you give birth to me and make me suffer in this world? Miracle never expected that the son she had given half her life to and loved deeply would one day hit her. She was so emotional that she became a bit hysterical. The family is poor because of you. I became poor because I gave birth to you. If I hadn't given birth to you, I would be living a much more comfortable life now. Hearing this, Leo got even angrier. He picked up the chair beside him and threw it at Miracle. I didn't ask you to give birth to me. You did it voluntarily. Since you gave birth to me, no matter what I do wrong, you should endure it. The commotion in the room alerted the neighbors. When they saw Leo hitting Miracle, they cursed Leo for being unfilial. Unexpectedly, Miracle was muddle-headed. She quickly protected Leo behind her and slammed the door shut. This is between me and my son. Why do you care so much? My son is young and doesn't understand now. He'll be fine when he grows up. To pay for the high medical expenses, Miracle could only borrow money everywhere. But the money Miracle had borrowed for the IVF to have the second child hadn't been paid off yet. Miracle had no way to borrow money and was frowning all day. Later, she somehow heard that Grace had won the first prize in the national dance competition and got a bonus. She went to Grace's place that night. Grace, Mom heard that you got a 30. 0 bonus from the competition. Your brother is in trouble now. You must help him. Grace looked up at me, probably asking for my opinion. I touched Grace's head. This is the money you earned through your hard work. How to spend it is up to you. Grace is grown up now. Auntie respects your choice. Grace nodded. Then turned around and refused Miracle. I won't give you the money. You don't need to come to me again. Miracle didn't expect to be refused. She was a bit furious. No matter what. You came out of my womb. Leo is your younger brother. How can you stand by and watch him in trouble? Grace, having fulfilled my adsesh. You're so heartless. I'm your real mother. While cursing, she raised her hand and tried to slap Grace. I was about to stop her. But Grace grabbed Miracle's wrist before me. Probably because of years of dancing practice. Although Grace was only a teenager, she was already as tall as her mother. You gave birth to me. But you've also been my nightmare. I only have one mother in this life. And that's Auntie. Don't forget. We've already cut off our relationship. If you dare to hit me again next time, don't blame me for being rude. Seeing that Grace wasn't bullied, I finally felt relieved. Grace turned around and winked at me. Then pushed Miracle out of the door with force. Miracle wasn't paying attention and tripped over the threshold, falling directly to the ground. She covered her waist and struggled to get up. You ungrateful wretch. You little ungrateful wretch. She was about to lay hands on Grace when Brian rushed back in a hurry. Behind him was the lawyer who had helped us with the lawsuit last time. Miracle. We've installed surveillance cameras at the door. I've intercepted the entire process of you coercing Grace for money, and even trying to beat her up. If you don't leave now, I'll ask the lawyer to sue you for extortion and intentional injury right away. 30,000 yuan may not be a large amount, but it's enough to put you in prison for a while. If you have a criminal record, your precious son won't be able to become an official. And even joining the army will be out of the question. In the end, Miracle was intimidated by Brian's words and didn't dare to make things difficult for Grace anymore. In order to raise the medical expenses, Miracle could only sell the house she was living in now and moved into a small rented bungalow with Leo. She divided the money from selling the house into 2 parts. One part to compensate the other party, and the other part to keep at home. Later, when Leo failed to get into college, Miracle wanted to use that money to let him learn a skill. However, she searched the whole house but couldn't find the money. After asking around, she found out that most of her savings had been taken by Leo to reward female streamers, leaving not a single cent for her. They really were mother and son. In her last life, she stole my savings to reward male streamers. And in this life, her son stole her money to reward female streamers. Since Leo was already over 18 years old, the money couldn't be retrieved at all. Miracle was so angry that she fainted on the spot. Because they couldn't afford the rent without money, they were soon evicted by the landlord. Miracle came to my house again. But this time, she came to beg me, man, for the sake of our sisterhood, let Leo and me stay here for a while. You're so good to Grace. Leo is your real nephew. And you'll be good to him too, right? Looking at Miracle's submissive appearance, I sneered in my heart. In my last life, because of my soft heart Dennis, I let her move into my house, living under someone else's roof. She not only lacked the self-awareness of a lodger, but also opposed me everywhere and tried every means to make me angry every day. The doctor once told me that the reason I got breast cancer was due to long-term anger and pent-up depression. In this new life, I always keep in mind this saying. Enduring for a moment leads to ovarian cysts, and taking a step back leads to breast hyperplasia. So, for the sake of my breasts and my health, I picked up the broom at home and drove Miracle out. I love Grace because she is cute and sensible. Although Leo is my nephew, with his character, I'd rather not recognize him. You don't need to come again. Every time you come, I'll drive you away. Without money to rent a house, Miracle could only take Leo to live in the shabby street warehouse and work 3 jobs a day to make ends meet. Because she had to work to earn money, Miracle had no time to take care of her child at all. Without his mother's discipline, Leo became even more rebellious. Just after turning 19, He got involved with a female streamer online and even got her pregnant before marriage. When Miracle heard that the girl was pregnant, she was actually very happy and boasted about it everywhere. "Look how capable my son is. He managed to win that girl over without spending a penny." She thought that with the girl pregnant, she could firmly control her. Unexpectedly, the girl was not an easygoing person. She demanded a betrothal gift of 588 yuan, threatening that if she didn't get it, she would abort the child. Leo was obsessed with the female streamer and threatened to commit suicide, forcing Miracle to raise the betrothal gift for him, or else he would cut off relations with her. For the sake of her son and the child in the female streamer's womb, Miracle had to turn to Grace again. After being admitted to a key university, Grace started an e-commerce company by her own efforts in her freshman year. She was smart, flexible, hardworking, and down to earth. In just 2 years, she made a fortune. Grace was filial. To show her gratitude for my upbringing over the years, she directly bought a villa in the city and put it in my name. Later, seeing that I was too tired from doing housework every day, she even hired a nanny. When Miracle stepped into my villa, her eyes were filled with envy. This time, her attitude towards Grace was much better than last time. "Grace, I heard that you're already your own boss now." I said that the daughter Miracle gave birth to must be extraordinary. "When I gave birth to you, I endured pain for a whole day and night." Before she could finish, Grace interrupted her. "I was indeed born by you. But I owe my current achievements to my aunt. If my aunt hadn't taken me away from you, I'm afraid I would have been beaten to death by you long ago. Now you don't need to try to build a mother-daughter relationship with me. I don't recognize you." These words made the smile on Miracle's face freeze. "What are you talking about? It doesn't matter if you don't recognize me. But you have to recognize your brother. Right? I admit that I was indeed sorry to you back then. But your brother has never done anything to sorry you. Now he's getting married. And you have to help him. Right?" Grace sneered and rolled up her sleeve, revealing the scar on the back of her hand. "Back then, Leo stabbed Grace's hand with scissors over a toy. The wound was deep and large, and it took Grace several years to recover. I don't dare to recognize a brother who can stab his sister with scissors." Miracle wanted to say more, but Grace was already impatient. She directly ordered the security guards in the villa area to throw Miracle out. Failing to borrow money, the female streamer directly aborted the child and cut off contact with Leo. Leo resented Miracle because of this and ran away from home. Later, in order to make a living, he became addicted to online loans and borrowed a lot of money from loan sharks. He squandered all that money, but when the repayment date came, he couldn't produce a single cent. The loan sharks came to the door. Leo rummaged through the room and took all of Miracle's hidden savings to pay off the debt. Even so, it still wasn't enough. At this time, Leo found Miracle's wedding ring and wanted to take it out to pawn. Miracle refused, and the two got into a fight. Later, Leo won. He took the ring and left, but there was no sound in the room. It wasn't until a week later that the neighbors found out that Miracle had been beaten to death by Leo. The body had been lying in the room for a week and started to stink. The police asked the neighbors nearby, "Why didn't you stop the fight when you heard it?" The neighbor said, "We didn't dare to interfere in their family affairs." When Miracle was beaten before, she said herself that Leo was just young and would grow out of it. Now he's really grown out of it, and even knows to steal the family's ring to pawn. Later, the police issued a warrant for Leo's arrest. Leo was bold. He hid around and hung out with gangsters for 2 years, committing quite a few illegal and criminal acts. Later, he was caught by the police and directly sent to prison. Since the crimes he committed were not minor, there's no possibility for him to get out of prison in this lifetime. When Grace heard about these things, her expression was very calm. I asked her if she was sad. After all, she had such a family in this life. But Grace said, "They're not my family. Aunt, I only have one family member in this life. And that's you. If it weren't for you, I couldn't have my current life." I looked at Grace and smiled. "No. It's not my credit. You were brave enough. You saved yourself." The end.